Welcome back to another episode of Create a New Tomorrow. I'm your host, Ari Gronich, and today I have with me Claudia Garbutt, all the way from Germany. She is a molecular biologist turned mindset coach for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to shatter invisible ceilings and create more inner peace, income, and impact without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness. Welcome, Claudia. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and how you became a molecular biologist turned mindset coach? I mean, this takes some explanationing.
Does. Well, hello, and thank you so much for having me. And yeah, so this story is a little bit like a crisscross. So I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I was never one of those people who knew exactly that they wanted to become an entrepreneur. So I really surprised myself here. And it's also kind of ironic because the thing that I hated most growing up was public speaking, especially in English. And here we are. So how did I get there? Well, after I finished university, all I wanted to do was have this nice, comfortable job that was fulfilling, that paid well, and that left me enough time to enjoy my life. But guess what? As it turned out, it wasn't that easy to find a job like that. And I studied biology because I was driven by my curiosity. I wanted to understand how life works on every level. And this is still one of my major driving forces for my curiosity, I guess. But I've shifted my focus slightly. So I've had a couple of key experiences that slowly but steadily shifted my direction and my focus. So the first one was definitely when I got diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 28. And this pretty much turned my whole life upside down from one day to the next. And I still very clearly remember my first reaction to that diagnosis, which, as strange as it may sound, was a sense of relief. And that was weird, right? Because at that point, I mean, who gets the diagnosis of a potentially deadly illness and thinks, oh, phew. So at that point in my life, I was just suffering from a major burnout. And being sick finally gave me the break that I was looking for. And to understand that, you have to know that I grew up in a family where everyone was always busy and working very, very hard. And you didn't just take a break. You know, breaks were for the lazy, for the elderly, or well, for the sick. And so I finally had the right excuse, if you want, to take a break without feeling guilty about it. At least if you want to call going through chemotherapy a break. And it sounds so weird when I say it out loud, but that's often the case when you talk about the things that hold us back from doing the sensible things, right? They make perfect sense in our heads, but when we actually talk about them, they sound ridiculous.
It's funny because I would have, from like age 7 to 24, I would have died for a proper diagnosis. I would have been so happy that I got a proper diagnosis instead of, the years of not knowing what the symptoms were, not knowing why they were, not knowing how to fix them. So I totally understand, the sigh of relief when you actually know something is actually wrong with me. I'm not just making it up in my head. It's an actual thing. And now I can do something about that actual thing versus just, throwing darts on a dartboard trying to figure it out. So I totally get that. But yeah,
Yeah.
chemo is probably not a lot of fun.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't fun at all. But it made me aware of the pattern that I was stuck in. And I think probably for the first time in my entire life, I just really had the time to think about things. And I started to really question those beliefs that I grew up with. Like, was it really necessary to work 24/7? Or is struggle noble? Or do I really have to fulfill everyone else's expectations? And it's just when you have something like a near death experience, this changes a lot, right? Suddenly you start asking the right questions, the ones that are really important, like, do I like my life right now? Or do I like the direction in which I'm going? Or what would I regret not having done if I died right now?
Yeah, I think the audience could relate to that. I think that that probably 99.99999% of all human beings have things that they absolutely know they should be doing and yet can't get themselves to do any of them.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall back into old habits, especially when you're stressed and you don't pay close attention. So I knew that at that point in my life, I needed to leave a toxic work environment. I needed to leave a toxic relationship. And I wanted to find something that fulfilled me. So I just for myself, I knew that in order to beat the cancer, I had to define those goals and I had to take action. And that's what I did. So as soon as I got out of the hospital, I started to, well, slowly but surely break up that toxic relationship. So I left the toxic work environment, and then I applied for a scholarship at the end of the world in New Zealand. So um, I went to the other side of the world. I left everything behind and I basically started a new chapter in my life. But then it was still, you can't leave yourself behind. And then when you get to that place and you think you have done so much, you get stressed again and you fall back into old habits.
It's really hard to distinguish who we are from what we do. You know, like I noticed that when you anybody really introduces themselves when you say, "Who are you?" I am a chiropractor. I am a therapist. I am a construction worker. It's never I am this. I am me who does this thing. Right. It's always I am that. So, maybe that's part of what makes it so difficult to shift is the identity that you place within that.
Absolutely. It's like shedding your old skin or like something like that. And you don't know, you're vulnerable, you don't know what's coming next. It was quite terrifying, to be honest. And the conclusion I finally reached was that the best option for me would be to build my own online business because it allowed me to work flexible hours and I would be location independent. And because my husband is from New Zealand and he still has all his family on that side of the planet, and we moved back to Germany, so we were never quite sure where we would end up.
Mm-hmm.
Just having this flexibility is huge.
That's awesome. So let me ask you a few questions. I'm gonna take this in weird directions probably. So I'm just letting you know that we might go off on some interesting tangents, but biology of say a virus,
Mhm.
right? We've kind of gotten to the place where we've accepted in science that viruses are not alive. They're
Mhm.
not living things. So, how does a virus attack an immune system if it's not living? Because most things that attack us are the things that are living. And have you heard the theory that viruses are all exosomes that are just part of our body anyway? And so I just wanted to, like I said, it's off on a little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to check to see what your thought is on that.
I've never heard of that, and I've also never really thought about it. So, good question. I think the way it works is because we all have like DNA, so the genetic code works universally. So if the virus attacks a cell, it inserts its genetic material, and if it's active inside your cell, well, then it's translated into proteins and that starts a whole cascade. So it doesn't really have to be a living organism. But if you think about your genetic code as a book, it basically inserts a chapter into this book.
In such a mode of fear these days, because they don't understand, because nobody is actually telling them the truth of what these things are. And so like mindset becomes this mindset of fear, this mindset of lack, this mindset of isolation, rather than a mindset of, I know what's happening, and I know the kind of the timeline that it's going to take for this to go. And, there's not a lot of logic going on with people's experience of what's happening now, including especially the news and media and all that stuff. And so I'm just kind of like, how do we match? Because we want to match the fear with reality, right? And lack of fear with reality. So this is just a way to bring that mindset into the molecular biology a little bit in what's going on right now, because you've had to pivot quite a bit, I think, since this whole pandemic, right?
Yeah, I've never worked with viruses. I've worked with bacteria a lot. I've worked with human cell lines and animal cell lines and that kind of stuff. I've worked on projects that so it was basic research, or the last project I worked on was basic research into neurodegenerative diseases and figuring out what's going on in diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and that kind of stuff. So that was more than my area of research. Or medical interactions between different medicines. So if you have an adverse drug reaction between different drugs, that kind of thing. So it was quite a shift.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you've moved into this world of, as we talked about earlier, homeschooling your kids and doing this online thing. So give us kind of like, what's been your year like in a nutshell? Like what's this transition look like? And then what is the mindset that you had to have in order to do this whole mess without like pulling your hair out? Because you already had the chemo, so you didn't want the hair out. So I just, how did you get through all of this with a mindset that that you have, which is so positive? And I mean, anybody who's talking to you or watching this right now can see in your eyes the amount of joy that you exude in what you're doing. So
Good questions. I think when it all started last year, I was exactly at the point where I had just figured out exactly what I wanted to do. And it all felt like I had finally found what I wanted to do. And then the pandemic hit. I was like, oh, okay, is it wise to start all this right now at this point in time? And then I thought, well, what do I have to lose? There's nothing I have to lose. So why not go for it? And the last year has been really, really crazy because we also started a huge side project. So a friend of us, and so my husband and a friend of us together, we bought this huge, 3-story house. It's an old house, and we've been remodeling to turn it into 3 flats. Well, anyway, it's a huge project, a huge renovation project, and it all happened at the same time. So we started homeschooling, we started this building project on the side, I started building my business, and then I also started building my podcast. So it was all happening at the same time. And had you asked me before if it was possible to do all that while at the same time still go for a run every day, have some time to, like, alone time for my sanity, I would have said no way.
anything else that you'd like to share? We're going to wrap this up because I know you've got to go, but anything else that you'd like to quickly share? Anything that you're doing in the world that you'd like to share with people?
Well, maybe the last thing I like to share today is, if it scares you, it might be a good thing to try. I can't remember who said that, but I found that to be very, very true. If it scares you, it might be a good thing to try because it gets you outside of your current comfort zone. And when you get outside of your current comfort zone, great things happen. Because if you keep being stuck inside that zone and you keep doing what you've been doing all the time, you will keep getting what you've always gotten, and that might not be what you want to get. So if you want to change that, try the things that scare you.
Awesome. How can people get a hold of you if they'd like to learn more?
They can find me, or they can find my website, which is www.wiredforsuccess.solutions, or they can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn.
Awesome. Wired for Success Solutions.
.solutions, yeah.
.solutions. Okay. Wired for Success .solutions. If anybody would like to learn more about Claudia, I highly suggest that you connect with her. Molecular biologist turned mindset coach. I mean, how can it get any better than that? Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate all the value you've given to the audience today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. This has been another episode of Create a New Tomorrow. I'm your host, Ari Gronich, and I look forward to seeing all of you create a new tomorrow today and activate your vision for a better world. Peace and love.